And welcome everybody to the first episode of Let's DM with Bryans and Dragons. I am Bryans and Dragons, and we are going to be presenting for you a multi-tiered learning experience whereby you can learn yourself how to build your entire fantasy world as well as a campaign and then run it with your friends in the easiest way possible. Just to give you a little bit of background on me, I've been dungeon mastering now for 5 to 6 years, really consistently. I currently run my own campaign, of course, and that is an entire homebrewed world campaign with somewhere close now to 30 different cities, 6 different countries, multiple land masses, all with geography, each town down to taverns and inns and governors. It's pretty extensive. And all of that started very small building blocks over the course of time that has allowed me to create this world that I rather enjoy playing in. I feel like over the course of that time, I have learned innumerable tricks in order to be able to cut the time that it takes into building a homebrew world down considerably. My hope is to give those tricks to you. My ask is that you follow along as we go, because by the end of it, you can have your own homebrew world too. I'll be right here with you. And if we can build a decent enough world on my end, I would love to be able to run it with my regular group so that you all can see kind of what it looks like to take a world from complete zero all the way up to campaign. Now, the one thing that I really want to preface all of this with is this is not the right way. This is not the wrong way. This is not the only way to build a homebrew world. This is my way. Everybody's going to have their own way. And my hope is that when we're all done, what you do is not exactly what I do. Because it needs to feel as if it comes from you. It needs to be your own system. Take what you want from this, throw the rest away, and work on building your own system that fits best for you. Here's some tips and tricks. The first place that we're going to start 100% building a world is in the brain. We need to help our creativity unlock itself. We have tons of great ideas. We have immeasurable amount of stories and archetypes and good, interesting stuff in there, but we need to find a way to unlock it. And what I feel like is the easiest way to do that is by just starting out with a small level of visual scaffolding. I want something that I can look at, that I can let my brain start teasing and pulling apart and adding elements in my imagination to be able to begin building this world first inside of my head, second onto the piece of paper. The best way to do that, I believe, is a little website called incarnate.com. If you haven't been to Incarnate, I highly recommend it. It's inkarnate.com. And what incarnate.com is a map building program, a map building browser-based program. I believe the subscription is $7 a month, give or take. Be that as it may, it is easily the best $7 that I spend on my game. It's easily the best money that I spend on my game, and I think that I've ever really spent on my game because I feel like I use Incarnate more frequently than I use anything else. You'll see Incarnate right up here. This is logged in to my Incarnate account. You'll see that I have a few maps here that I created, as well as one that I borrowed from the community, this Castle Sightland. That's going to be going into my campaign that I'm currently running right now and saved me a whole lot of time. There are tons of community maps on Incarnate, and highly recommended. So let's just go ahead and dive right on in. Let's make our visual scaffolding. We're going to go to create new map. We're going to scroll down. You can't see where this is scrolling, so we are going to go ahead and move myself up here. What we want to do is click on this fantasy world button down here at the bottom. We could use a parchment world, and I think parchment worlds can be kind of cool as well, but for our purposes, a little bit of color is going to help us differentiate, and for beginners, I recommend going fantasy world, and we're going to go ahead and start there. Depending on what you plan to do with this map, it actually does kind of make a difference. The landscape, portrait, square, I find that if I'm importing these maps into Roll20, I think that they actually fit better if they're in a square. They seem as if they work better in the adjust page size within Roll20. Otherwise, I don't think it really matters. For right now, since we're kind of just starting with the map, I like the idea of starting with something that's a rectangle and not a square, because I feel like most maps are rectangular, right? And we're just going to go ahead and log on in. So we have now an ocean. This blue back here is the ocean that begins our world. Within the depths, the recesses of this sea, our world springs forth. So first, what I like to do is just start with a rando landmass. Boom, done. And inside of this landmass, we want to start the process of placing where we want our cities. We want to start the process of placing in our mind where we want the mountains, where we want the rivers, all of the geography. I want you to start taking the opportunity and visualizing this. I am going to subtract a little bit here from the top because I feel like the world is just too circular. And we'll do a little bit of this and some of this. And now we have something that kind of looks like the formation of a small archipelago, maybe. We'll turn this into a small island. Now we have something that could very possibly be swampy. We have a world that has quite a lot of water. This can be literally any size that we want to. This map can range from a single city that sits maybe right here in the middle with a large river coming into it, to a world that has hundreds of cities if you really want to. I would caution you on the world size and scope. If the world is too big, it is going to be very unwieldy. Now you don't want it to be a single city, unless it is like one massive city, in which case your world that you're building is going to be a little bit different than this world that we're going to be building, which is slightly larger than a single city. For me, I feel like, in as non-arbitrary as I want to try to make it sound, 5 to 7 cities, villages, towns, is probably a good starting point for the beginning of a, we'll say, medium-sized campaign. The first world that I ever actually made had 9 cities. 3 cities of elves, 3 cities of dwarves, 3 cities of humans. There was something that felt kind of symmetrical about that. From there, the next world that I built was 13 cities, and they were connected together. So altogether, you had 20-ish cities. And then the final world that I built had 13 cities, and it connects as well together into one large continent. So you can add on to this later if you want to add a bit more depth, to add another story, to add a little bit more je ne sais quoi to your world. But for our purposes here, I'm going to say we start with, say, 5 to 7 cities. Now, when I say cities, I kind of use that as a catch-all, because realistically, we need to have more villages and towns than we do big cities. From a Dungeon Master standpoint, I assure you that towns and villages are vastly easier to manage than large cities. Large cities take a lot of thought. Large cities have many stops. They have boroughs. They usually have pretty sophisticated forms of government, whereas a small village, a little bit more manageable. It might have 2 inns. It might have a tavern, an armory of some kind. Maybe it has a mayor. Much simpler, right? So when we think about cities, especially even, Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of fantasy worlds, there generally are centralized large cities with towns and villages around them, right? So if we want to keep with the idea of immersion, we probably don't want every single place of residence to be this massive hulking thing. Usually smaller towns have more of a feudal high fantasy feel, with, like I say, a few cities sprinkled in. In addition, as we're allowing our brain to visualize this area, I want you to think about what areas of danger would be. Are there any lands within your map that maybe are infested by undead? Maybe some sort of a large swamp. Maybe there's a hag in the middle of that swamp. Are any of the lands covered by orcs and orcish clans? Is there any desert that might have desert dwelling creatures? Where are the places in your land that people do not go, that make traversing your world more difficult? From here, from this map space, we now have the beginnings of a world. We can make it whatever we want to. And what I would caution you in doing, what I would caution you to not do, rather, is start putting too much in at the beginning. I would recommend, honestly, taking like 2 days. Take this map, visualize it, put it into your brain, and when you have some spare time to begin adding thoughts to it, think about what your world looks like. Think about as much as you can before you start placing things. Because the second you place something, it immediately becomes real. It immediately becomes a block to your creativity. And I know that kind of sounds strange because depending on what it is we place, maybe there's more creativity you can put into it. For example, if you put down a city, there's obviously lots that you can put into that city, but that area that is a city can now not be a lot of things. It can't really be a lake. It can't generally be a mountain range. It can't be a wyvern lair. It can't be the site of a coven of hags unless they live in the city, which isn't particularly common. Do you see what I'm saying? So I really want you to get a good idea of what is going to be going on in your brain. Excuse me. Let me roll that back. I want you to get a good idea of what things that you want to have placed in this world before you begin placing lots of it. And then after that, maybe we start placing things here, there. On the next episode of Let's DM with Bryans and Dragons, we are going to go ahead and place our geographic features. So I would urge you, if you enjoyed this short beginning content, check out the following videos, because we really do take this thing quite in depth. Please like, please subscribe. Thank you for watching, and we're going to look forward to seeing you next week on Let's DM with Bryans and Dragons.